We are halfway through the year already, so it is time to freak out about all the books that I have read and haven't read. This is the mid-year freakout tag, and let's get into it. Question 1 is the best book you've read so far in 2023, and I have been having an excellent reading year where I have enjoyed most of the books that I have read. I am going to put 2 as my favorite books so far this year. These are very likely to be in my top 5 books that I've read this year by the end of the year, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang and The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. The Poppy War is a historical fantasy based on real-life events that took place in China, but it is also a fantasy where our main character does have the ability to call upon the gods to give her special powers. And I went into this book thinking it was very violent and I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. And that is all true. Like, all the reviews that say that are accurate, but I enjoyed it despite that. And that used to be a reason that I did not read books. I have been obsessed with The Poppy War since I read it. It is definitely one of the books that I've talked about the most, even with my non-reader friends. I was like, oh my gosh, I would not stop talking about this book. Then there is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, which is very different in tone. This is much more just fun adventure fantasy. It is also pirate fantasy. This is also a historical fantasy. This is based in, I think, 12th century Middle East. And I had a blast reading this. This is one of the most fun books I have read, and I am looking forward to reading other books by Shannon Chakraborty. Question number 2 is, what is the best sequel you've read in 2023? And whenever I first saw this question, I was like, I haven't read that many ending of series. I've read more beginning of series. But I looked back at the books that I've read, and I actually have a few that I can name here. The Best Sequel Award is going to go to Crooked Kingdom. This is the first time that I have read Crooked Kingdom, though I have read Six of Crows previously, and Crooked Kingdom was so much better than Six of Crows. I think every book Leigh Bardugo writes is better than her previous book, and I was surprised how much I loved Crooked Kingdom. It is definitely my favorite of the duology, and it makes me more interested in other books Leigh Bardugo has written. The other book I'm going to include here in best sequels is Victory of Eagles, which is the book that I'm currently reading, so it's a little bit cheating, but I'm currently rereading the Temeraire series, and I have reread the first book in the Temeraire series multiple times, but this is the first time I'm rereading Victory of Eagles, and it is so much better than I remembered. This is also historical fantasy. It is set during the Napoleonic Wars, and we have dragons, and it is one of my favorite dragon fantasy books that I've ever read. Victory of Eagles, which is book 5, is the first book that we have the perspective of one of the dragons as a POV of the book. Previously, we only had one POV, and this introduces a second one, and it is glorious, and I am loving every second of it. I also want to shout out A Clash of Kings, which is another sequel that I've read this year. It doesn't do anything that super stands out, but it is a solid sequel. As I've said in previous videos, I watched the Game of Thrones show first before diving into the Song of Ice and Fire books. And book 1 and book 2 follow the show to a great extent, which is awesome to see. Well, I should say that in reverse. The show follows the books for books 1 and 2 very closely, and it has been a joy to see a show and a book that closely resembling each other, and I am enjoying reading this series. Question number 3 is a new release that you've not read but want to, and there are so many books that I could include on this. Basically, all the books that I've mentioned in my previous new release video that I haven't read. Also, books that came out earlier in this year, like Unseelie, Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries, Spice Road, The Magician's Daughter, Day of Fallen Night, Nightbirds, Some Desperate Glory, and Gods of the Wyrdwood. Those are definitely books that I want to get to, hopefully before the end of the year. They are all new releases this year that sound right up my alley. Question number 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and I'm going to name 3 here. The first being Godkiller, which I know it has already been released in the UK, but it is not out in the US yet, and I've only heard positive things about this book. It sounds amazing, and I cannot wait to read it. The next is Bookshops and Bonedust, which comes out in November. This is the prequel to Legends and Lattes, which is one of my favorite cozy fantasy books. I believe this one is also supposed to remain cozy despite it being a prequel, because this is supposed to be one of Viv's down days, or not when she's not on an adventure, and I am so looking forward to that. And my other really highly anticipated release is Thornhedge from T. Kingfisher. I've only read one T. Kingfisher book so far, but this one I am super excited about. I'm pretty sure it's a dark fairy tale retelling, and I cannot wait. Question number 5 is biggest disappointment. And again, I'm going to name 2 books here. The first being The Great Bear. This is the sequel to the Misawa saga. I really enjoyed the first book, The Barren Grounds, in the Misawa saga, and I was going into this book with fairly high expectations because of that. And this book just didn't live up to the first one. Super unfortunate, but it does give me pause about reading the rest of the series. This is a portal fantasy where 2 indigenous children in the foster care system go through a portal and into the world of their tribe's legends, which was really, really fun to read in the first book. Unfortunately, in book 2, I was actually more interested in the story that was taking place in our world than I was in the story taking place in Misawa, which is just kind of a letdown for me. And I don't know, it could have been good, but it was disappointing. And the second book I want to mention here is The Boneshard Daughter. This one I softy enough'd. I might come back to this and finish it at some point, but I was mostly just bored and wasn't really invested in any of the characters. And I got about halfway through this one, and it returned itself to the library before I finished it, but I just wasn't feeling the compulsion to come back to it, which is why I ran out of time to read it. So I might try this one later, but I might not. We'll see. Question number 6 is biggest surprise, which for me was definitely the Poppy War. Because of things that I heard about this book, I was not sure that I would like it. It has been described as grimdark, as very violent, and those are things in the past that I usually avoided whenever choosing books, but I'm thinking those should not be anti-buzzwords for me anymore, because I have enjoyed books that are grimdark, that are violent, and I don't know, like I'm learning more about myself, and I'm now more open to reading more books. Question 7 is favorite new author, either a debut author or a new to me author. And in order to not repeat myself, because I could just go on about Shannon Chakraborty and R.F. Kuang, I am going to talk about a couple new authors that I've not talked about so far on this list. The first one being Angeline Boulley. I read Warrior Girl Unearthed this year, and this is a contemporary book, which I don't read very many contemporaries, but I absolutely loved this story. I have not read Firekeeper's Daughter, but I now want to go back and read that one, and definitely I want to be on the lookout for any other Angeline Boulley books that come out. And the next one I'm going to mention here is Fonda Lee. This is mostly also just someone I am interested in reading more of her backlist and keep an eye on other books that she puts out. The only book I've read by her is Untethered Sky, and I thought it was an absolutely wonderful novella and really packed a punch. It was beautifully written, and it makes me want to check out this author more. Question 8 is newest fictional crush, and the obvious answer is Amina al-Sirafi. She is totally badass and someone I aspire to be, and I definitely look up to her. And can I be Amina al-Sirafi? Question number 9 is newest favorite character, and I have not talked about the Temeraire books on this channel enough, but Temeraire is my favorite dragon in all of dragon history. I absolutely love Temeraire, and I love the relationship between Lawrence, our human character, and Temeraire, our dragon character. These characters are willing to do anything for each other, and they literally do anything for each other in this series. They also force each other to look at the world differently. There are things that Lawrence takes for granted. He's like, this is just the way the world works. And Temeraire's like, but why does it have to be that way? And just the push and pull between them and the way they force each other to evaluate everything about themselves and about the world. I love seeing the world through these characters' eyes. I love seeing their relationship to each other, and I am thoroughly enjoying my reread of the Temeraire series. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and I've really not read any tearjerkers so far this year. The closest I've come to that is Untethered Sky, which is a story about grief to some extent. That is one of the themes. Also a story about family and belonging, and absolutely gorgeous book. I didn't cry. I did get a little teary-eyed at a couple points in this book, and I don't know, I guess that's the closest I've come to crying in a fictional story this year. Question 11 is a book that made you happy, and again, the obvious answer is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. Can you tell this is one of my favorite books this year? It is such a fun, swashbuckling pirate fantasy. It's also a getting the crew back together, which is one of my favorite tropes. So of course I had fun reading it. But in interest of not continuing to repeat myself, I'm going to say Mysteries of Thorn Manor. This is the sequel to Sorcery of Thorns. This book is just plain fun. It's basically an extended epilogue of Sorcery of Thorns, but we also get some fun, entertaining bits, like a sentient dress-a-gown who's trying to attack our protagonist. Just hilarity ensues. We also have a cursed suit of armor and other objects in a house that have been magically altered in order to cause our protagonist problems. And it was just a lot of fun to read this story. Question 12 is the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year. And I don't really buy books, but I did buy 3 books at a library sale, and I'm going to show them off because they're beautiful to me. These were 50 cents each at a library sale, and they might not be the most beautiful books on the outside, but they are gorgeous books on the inside. The Live Ship Traders is one of my favorite series of all time. I absolutely love Robin Hobb, and these 2 books and City of Dragons are the only Robin Hobb books that I own. I would love to collect the entire catalog that Robin Hobb has written. Someday I will. I would also love if the Live Ship Traders had an anniversary edition the way the Farseer trilogy has anniversary editions. Those are also books that I would love to own someday. And what is probably my actually most gorgeous book that I bought this year is A Dance with Dragons. This was also from the same library sale. They had this one for, I believe, $2. It might have been $1, I don't know, which is an absolute steal because it is an excellent condition, A Song of Ice and Fire book, and it is the only A Song of Ice and Fire book that I now own. Again, I would love to own all of these someday, but for now, this is a good addition to my book collection. And question number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And the answer is all of the books. Specifically, the books that I haven't gotten to yet on my 23 books to read in 2023 list. But I will name 2 books, or actually series specifically. I want to read the 3rd arc of the Wings of Fire series. The 3rd arc of the Wings of Fire is on my 23 books to read in 2023. This is a middle grade dragon fantasy. It is a fun story about dragons. I don't even know what the 3rd arc is about. And I don't know if I should go back and explain the 1st arc to explain what Wings of Fire is. They're fun and enjoyable for adults to read. And the next books I need to be getting to very soon are the Wheel of Time books. So I have read The Eye of the World previously, but I'm trying to read The Great Hunt and The Dragon Reborn before season 2 of the show comes out. So I really need to get on that because it is coming out in like less than 2 months. So Those are my most immediate reading plans. Let me know what is one book you want to read before the end of the year in the comments. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I'm not going to tag anyone specifically, but if you want to do this, you are now tagged. And I hope to see you in another video. Happy reading.